The smarter you are, the harder you make your own life. That isn't a motivational quote, and it isn't meant to flatter you. It's a warning, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. If you've ever felt like your own brain is somehow working against you, fighting the very things you want to do, you are about to understand the mechanism behind it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's something nobody tells smart people. There is a group of people walking around with higher IQs than 98% of the population who are also more anxious, more overwhelmed, and more stuck in life than the average person. Not because they lack ability, not because they're lazy or unmotivated, but because their own high IQ brain is quietly sabotaging them from the inside, running patterns they never chose and never learned to manage. I call it the smart person's trap, and if you clicked on this video, there's a very good chance you are already caught somewhere inside it without ever having realized it had a name. So ask yourself honestly, does any of this sound familiar? You understand new things faster than most people around you. You grasp ideas quickly, and yet, somehow, you consistently get less done than they do. You overthink every decision until the opportunity quietly slips away. You can see everyone else's problems with perfect clarity, give them brilliant advice, and then completely fail to solve the exact same problems in your own life. If even one of those landed, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken, and there is nothing wrong with you. That is simply how a high IQ brain tends to operate when no one has taught it the rules. In this video, I'll walk you through 11 psychology facts about what is actually happening inside the high IQ mind, each one backed by real research. And I need you to stay until fact number 9, because fact 9 is the one that's going to completely reframe how you think about your own potential and your own blind spots. So settle in, watch for the ones that feel familiar, and let's get into it. Psychology fact number 1. And this one genuinely surprised me when I first read it. People with higher IQs consistently go to bed later and wake up later than the average person. It shows up again and again. This comes from a large study out of the London School of Economics that tracked more than 20,000 people across several years of their lives, watching how their habits lined up with their measured intelligence. Now, before you use this as a convenient excuse to stay up until 3 in the morning scrolling, including watching videos like this one, let me explain what is actually happening inside that night owl brain. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. It's the part of your brain that switches on precisely when you are alone, quiet, and free from the constant stream of input the outside world keeps throwing at you. High IQ brains instinctively chase that state. At night, with no social pressure, no notifications, and no noise, the network fires at full power, and the deepest, most original thinking finally gets the room it needs. But here is the warning attached to this fact. Sleep deprivation destroys cognitive function faster than almost anything else. Just 24 hours without proper sleep can cut your mental performance by up to 40%. So the real lesson isn't stay up late because you're clever, it's this. Find the specific hours when your mind is sharpest, protect them fiercely, and then protect your sleep with exactly the same discipline. Fact 2 genuinely changed how I think about success. Back in 1994, psychologist Daniel Goleman published the book called Emotional Intelligence, and the research inside it quietly rocked the entire academic world. Here's what the studies kept showing. Raw, measurable IQ, the thing we obsess over, only explains roughly 20 to 25% of the difference in real-life outcomes between one person and another. The remaining 75 to 80% comes down to something else entirely: emotional intelligence, EQ, the ability to read, regulate, and respond to emotion in yourself and in the people around you. And here's the uncomfortable twist that follows. High IQ individuals very often score lower on emotional intelligence than the average person does. the very thing that makes them brilliant can leave them lopsided. It works like a compensation effect. Spend years developing pure analytical, logical thinking, and the emotional processing circuits simply get less exercise. It's like training your upper body every single day and skipping legs entirely. So, in practice, high IQ people rationalize their emotions instead of actually feeling them. I'm not angry, they'll say. I'm just logically observing that this situation is suboptimal. The feeling gets analyzed, never experienced. The fix here is a skill called emotional labeling. Instead of vaguely saying, I feel bad, you get specific and precise. I feel overlooked. I feel behind. I feel like I'm not being understood by anyone. This matters because precise emotional language has been shown to reduce the raw intensity of an emotion by up to 30%. That isn't soft therapy speak. That is measurable neuroscience you can use tonight. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust. He lost his family, his work, almost everything a person can lose. And from inside that suffering, he built one of the most important frameworks in all of psychology. He observed something most people miss. People with higher cognitive ability ask the question why more often, more deeply, and far more relentlessly than anyone else. It sounds profound, and it is, but it carries a real cost. A 2018 study published in the journal Intelligence surveyed 3,715 members of Mensa, the top 2% of IQ scores. It found that 26.7% of them had been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, against 18% in the general population, and 20% had been diagnosed with depression, compared to just 8% in the general population. Sit with those numbers for a moment, because these are not small or accidental differences. They are a pattern. Why does this happen? Because a high IQ brain does not search for meaning gently or passively. It obsesses over it. It keeps asking, why am I here, and what is the point, long past the moment you'd give anything to rest. But here's the reframe I want you to hold on to. This is not a character flaw, and it is not a defect. It's a powerful feature running on the wrong setting. Meaning is not something you find. Meaning is something you build. So every night, write one single sentence. What did I do today that mattered, even a little, to another human being? You do not need some enormous grand purpose to feel whole. You need a small, real, daily one. Fact 4 is going to frustrate you. And honestly, it should. A researcher at Columbia Business School studied thousands of investors over many years and found a result that runs completely backwards to common sense. Investors with higher education and higher measured intelligence actually earned lower returns on their portfolios, not higher, lower. They overtraded, they overanalyzed, they kept adjusting, hedging, and quietly second-guessing every move they made. Meanwhile, the less analytically gifted investors simply made a decision, committed to it, and moved on with their lives. Psychologist Barry Schwartz gave this trap a name. He called it paralysis by analysis. And you have felt it. The business idea you have been planning for 18 months. The book that has been sitting in the draft stage for 2 full years. The plan that is always almost ready but never quite begins. Or the relationship you analyze so thoroughly that your actual feelings got quietly replaced by a running pros and cons spreadsheet in your head. The thinking didn't clarify anything. It slowly buried the answer entirely. Here's what's physically happening. Your brain generates more scenarios, detects more potential failure paths, and computes more variables than average. And every single new variable it produces hands you another reason to wait a little longer. So here is your rule, and I want you to write it down. When you have 70% of the information you actually need, you act. The remaining 30% is not available before you start. It only ever comes from doing. Set hard deadlines on your decisions. 24 hours for the small ones, 1 week for the medium ones, 1 month at the absolute maximum for the big ones. And when that clock runs out, you commit. Waiting is also a choice. Everyone has heard of a Dunning-Kruger effect. Low competence paired with high confidence. The less someone actually knows, the more certain they tend to feel. But almost nobody talks about the other end of that same curve. Genuinely high performers, people with real skill and real knowledge, systematically underestimate themselves. It even has a name, imposter syndrome. And according to Harvard research, it affects roughly 70% of high achievers at some point. Here's the mechanism behind it. The more you learn, the more visible the edges of your own knowledge become. A first-year medical student feels confident. A veteran surgeon who understands the infinite complexity feels deeply humbled. Expertise breeds an awareness of your own ignorance, and for high IQ people who are constantly aware of just how much more there is to know, this quietly hardens into a permanent undercurrent of "I am not good enough yet." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You cannot learn what you think you already know." That is the bright side of this trait. It keeps you genuinely learning. The dark side is that it can quietly stop you from ever acting at all. So here's the practical move. Start an evidence journal. Not a gratitude journal, an evidence journal. Every single week, write down 3 specific, concrete pieces of proof that you are actually capable. Not feelings, hard evidence. Because your brain can argue with your feelings all day long, and it will win every time. But it cannot argue with documented, written-down evidence. That is the one debate your self-doubt is simply not equipped to win. Evolutionary psychologist Satoshi Kanazawa published research that caused a great deal of controversy. He found that people with higher intelligence actually reported lower life satisfaction the more frequently they socialized, which is the exact opposite of everyone else. For people of average intelligence, more socializing reliably meant more happiness. For high IQ people, more socializing tended to mean noticeably less happiness. The pattern flipped completely. His explanation is rooted in what he calls the Savannah theory of happiness. Our brains evolved over hundreds of thousands of years inside small tribes, where social connection was quite literally the difference between life and death. So most human brains are deeply reward-wired for company. But high IQ individuals appear to have a greater capacity to override those ancient instincts. They don't need constant social input, and getting too much of it actually drains them. If you have ever felt that nobody really gets you, understand this. That is not your imagination, and it is not arrogance. When your mind runs at a different cognitive frequency, genuinely deep connection simply becomes rarer by default. But here is the critical nuance most people miss. Solitude and loneliness are not the same thing at all. One of them is a deliberate choice. The other one is a quiet, persistent ache that follows you even inside a full room. Solitude is strategic withdrawal, the act of stepping back to recharge, to think, and to create. Loneliness is the painful sense of disconnection that can sit with you even when you are completely surrounded by other people. So stop trying to collect more connections. Start engineering deeper ones. Find the 2 or 3 people who actually operate at your frequency and invest everything there. That intellectual intimacy is the specific fuel a high IQ brain runs on. Einstein once said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." It's a beautiful line. It is also, for certain kinds of brains, quietly dangerous advice, and I'll show you exactly why in a moment. It's called shiny object syndrome. 15 books bought, 4 of them finished, 6 online courses purchased, 1 of them completed, 12 brilliant business ideas brainstormed in detail, and exactly 0 of them ever actually launched. This is not a discipline problem, no matter how it feels. It is a neurochemistry problem. Every time your brain encounters something new and intellectually stimulating, it fires dopamine, using the very same pathway involved in any addiction. For a high IQ brain, the act of starting something novel is intensely, almost overwhelmingly rewarding. But the middle phase, where the novelty has worn off and the genuinely hard work begins, is neurologically boring for this kind of mind. So it goes hunting for the next hit, the next exciting beginning, the next shiny new thing. You are not undisciplined and you are not flaky. You are, quite simply, dopamine addicted to the feeling of starting. The solution is something I call focused curiosity. You pick one domain and you go deep for 90 days, not 10 domains at once, scattered and shallow. One single domain given real, sustained, uninterrupted depth. And before you are ever allowed to start something new, you must finish at least 80% of the current thing. Call it your learning tax. Pay it first. Focused like this, your curiosity stops scattering you and starts making you dangerous. Quick question for you. Do you talk to yourself? Not in any concerning way, but do you think out loud, narrate your problems, or explain ideas to yourself as if you were quietly teaching a class with no students? If the answer is yes, then you are in remarkably good company. Tesla described having long internal conversations when solving engineering problems. Einstein asked himself questions out loud. Feynman physically taught concepts to himself like a student. A 2017 study in the journal Acta Psychologica confirmed what these minds already knew instinctively. People who engage in self-directed speech during a task perform measurably better, especially when that task is cognitively complex. The reason is that inner language forces your brain to organize, sequence, and externalize its own processing. It effectively creates a second observer sitting inside your own thinking, one that catches errors and sharpens your judgment. And here's the genuine upgrade. Third-person self-talk is even more powerful than first-person. Instead of asking, "Why am I so anxious about this?" you say, using your own name, "What is making you anxious, and what is the next logical step?" Using your own name activates the same self-regulation systems in your brain that switch on when you are calmly coaching somebody else. It lowers your emotional reactivity, and it noticeably increases your clarity in solving the actual problem. So try it tonight on a real problem you are genuinely stuck on. Speak to yourself, by name, the way you would speak to a friend you respected. Talk to yourself like you are your own most trusted advisor. Okay, this is fact number 9, the one I told you right at the start to wait for. And I'll be completely upfront with you. This one is uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me too. So take a breath before we go in. Most people firmly believe that a high IQ means strong resistance to manipulation and bad thinking. Researchers at Yale University and the University of Waterloo documented the opposite, a phenomenon they named Dysrationalia. That is, intelligent people making systematically irrational decisions, not occasionally by accident, but systematically, as a pattern. And the mechanism driving it is something called Myside bias, the tendency to judge information by whether it confirms what you already believe. Here is the critical insight, and you may need to hear it twice. High IQ individuals are not less biased than average people. They're simply far better at building sophisticated arguments that defend their existing biases. Read that again. When an intelligent person holds a wrong belief, they have far more intellectual firepower available to protect it. More logical-sounding arguments, more elaborate rationalizations, more ways to discredit the messenger instead of the message. A less analytically gifted person might drop a wrong belief fairly easily because they don't have the tools to fortify it. A genuinely intelligent person can defend that very same wrong belief comfortably for decades on end. In real life, this is exactly why high IQ people stay in clearly toxic relationships far too long, keep pouring money into obviously failed projects, and get pulled into conspiracies and high control groups more than average, not less. So here's the principle that comes out of all of this. Practice steel manning. Before you dismiss any idea, build the strongest possible version of it. Not the weakest, easiest version to knock down, the genuinely strongest one. If you cannot construct a truly compelling case for the other side, then you do not yet understand the issue well enough to dismiss it. And remember this above everything. The smarter you are, the more you should doubt what you feel most certain about. Fact 10 connects directly to the dopamine thread we pulled on a few facts ago. Research from Hopkins has established that high IQ individuals carry a higher stimulation threshold than the average person does. In practice, their nervous system requires more input, more novelty, complexity, and challenge simply to feel engaged and present. The ordinary is genuinely understimulating for this kind of brain. That is biology, not attitude or ingratitude. The first consequence is a higher statistical rate of experimentation with stimulants and substances, not out of recklessness, but because the brain is restlessly seeking the level of stimulation it just isn't getting from ordinary daily life. The second consequence is that ADHD and high IQ appear together far more frequently than chance alone would predict. Both of them involve distinct, unusual patterns in how the brain processes and chases dopamine throughout the day. The third is a deep susceptibility to work addiction. When your work is cognitively complex and stimulating, your brain treats it like a drug. Same dopamine pathways, same tolerance building. It needs a slightly higher dose each and every time. And the antidote, counterintuitively, isn't rest, it's structured stimulation. Build what's called a dopamine menu, a deliberate list of activities ranked from low to high stimulation, and manage them intentionally, the way an investor manages a portfolio. Then deliberately introduce periods of what I call productive boredom. No inputs, no stimulation, just quiet existence. It sounds unbearable, and that is precisely the point. It forces your brain to generate stimulation from the inside, which is exactly where creativity lives. This is the final fact, and it is the single thread that ties together everything we have talked about today. Dr. Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent 30 years at Yale studying one specific, destructive pattern of thought: overthinking. Her conclusion was clear, and this should be written somewhere visible for every high IQ brain. Overthinking does not solve your problems. Overthinking actively creates brand new ones while convincing you the whole time that it is helping. Every single time you run the same worry through your head again, you are not getting closer to an answer. You are physically reinforcing the neural pathway tied to that anxiety, making it more automatic, more powerful, and easier to trigger next time. Then there's neurologist Antonio Damasio, who studied patients with damage to the emotional centers of the brain. People who could now only reason purely logically became completely incapable of making decisions, any decisions at all. Not bad decisions, simply no decisions. His conclusion was that emotion is not the enemy of clear thinking. Emotion is the thing that actually initiates action in the first place. Logic only refines it after the engine has already started. So the real solution to overthinking is not, and never will be, more thinking. The solution is action. Any action, however small, because taking action changes your emotional state far faster than your emotional state ever changes through thinking. Not a big, heroic action, a micro action. Stand up, open the document, send the single message, make the one phone call. The very moment you start to move, the overthinking feedback loop breaks and the spell is finally interrupted. Your high IQ brain is not the problem here. The absence of motion is the problem. So move first and think while you are moving. That, more than anything else in this entire video, is the formula. Move, think while moving. 11 facts and one framework to tie them all together. I call it the S.M.A.R.T. brain protocol. And no, not in the way you are currently thinking. 5 principles, one for each letter, built specifically for a mind like yours. S is for stop defending the identity of being smart. When your core identity is simply, I am intelligent, then every mistake feels like a threat to who you are. Swap it for this. I am someone who gets smarter by doing hard things. M is for master your emotional vocabulary. 10 minutes every single night. Name precisely what you actually felt that day. Not bad, not stressed, but exactly what. This one habit slowly rebuilds the EQ circuitry that high IQ life tends to underdevelop. A is for act before you are ready. Your brain will never, ever feel fully ready because it is wired to keep finding more information to process. Use the 70% rule. Move at 70% and learn the rest while in motion. R is for reframe solitude as fuel, not failure. Schedule 60 minutes of deep solitude every day. No phone, no input, just you and your own thoughts. This is not antisocial behavior. This is essential maintenance for a high-performance brain. T is for train your attention more than your intelligence. The highest IQ in the entire world, fractured across 20 browser tabs and 3 notification streams, produces less than an average mind working in a state of genuine deep focus. So start with just 25 minutes of single task concentration a day and increase it weekly. Your intelligence is already there. It always was. All you're doing now is finally giving it a clear runway to actually take off. Let me leave you with one last thought. A brain is not something you simply have. A brain is something you are actively using right now in one specific way with specific habits and specific blind spots you may have never examined. Psychology does not make you smarter. What it does is hand you a map of your own mind. And the people who suffer the most are very often not the least intelligent ones. They're the most intelligent ones who were never given a map. And there is a particular gap that most brilliant people end up spending their entire lives stuck inside. It is the gap between knowing something and actually doing it. Knowing is easy. Crossing that gap is where everything is decided. You can close this video right now, having learned 11 genuinely fascinating things, and be in the exact same place 6 months from today. Or you can pick one thing, one fact, one single action, and you can do it before you sleep tonight. So tell me, which fact hit you the hardest? Leave it in the comments. Just a number is completely fine. I read every single one of them. And if this gave words to something you have carried quietly, share it with someone who needs it. Because sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't looking for more answers. They are just waiting for someone to finally hand them the map. Be kind to your mind, keep growing, and I will see you in the very next one.